Get cool stuff for what you were going to do anyway. Drink beer. With Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt, you can just snap a photo of your receipt and upload it to the website to rack up points for exclusive merch. Get points for every purchase, whether you're grabbing a pint on draft, a case for a party, or a tall boy at the stadium. Any size, any product, anywhere you buy Labatt. Buy beer, get gear. Sign up now at rewards.labattusa.com.
Congrats, I got you in, baby.
This is entertainment. People pay to watch this.
Pass to a cutting Hills. He darts in. He scores!
People actually subscribe.
All across central New York.
Time expired! Syracuse has done it!
It's Drive Time with your host, Tim Leonard.
Hey, guess what? I'm getting wild, man.
We welcome you into Drive Time. Wednesday afternoon in central New York and day 2 of the transfer portal, where we continue to react to all the things Syracuse basketball related in the portal. We continue to wonder who is the general manager for Syracuse basketball. Did get the official announcement earlier today about Jamal Brunt, who is one of the new assistant coaches for Syracuse basketball, Penn State associate head coach, 20 years of Division I experience. He's going to join Jerry McNamara's staff. We kind of knew that. Now it's official. It's out there. Seems like his staff is not done, so still waiting for the final knowings of the staff, final announcements. Still waiting to know who that general manager is. We can certainly talk about if it's a surprise, if it's disappointing that Syracuse does not have a general manager in place. Maybe they do have a GM in place right now, and we just don't know their name, and it's not official, and he hasn't totally gotten through the HR paperwork and everything. We can also talk about the latest pickup for Syracuse basketball coming over from Siena. On day number 2 of the portal, we have our second official addition to the Syracuse roster and our second Siena player. And I would remind all of you that this does not mean that just because it's day 2, this is going to be the last player that Syracuse brings in the portal. There's no need to freak out and think, oh, Syracuse is just going to bring in all Siena players. They can't get anyone else. They're clearly bringing in the Siena players first because those players had a good relationship with Jerry McNamara, and they were ready to make that jump. The other players that they are after in the portal, they got to come on visits. They got to have Zoom calls. They got to hear from other schools. The star players are not going to make a decision on day 2 of the portal. But there are 15 roster spots, and maybe Jerry will fill that out with 12 or 13. We'll see. But you have up until 15 roster spots. And 2 guys have come over. One, a very good player in Gavin Doty, who I think will be a contributor next year for Syracuse and will be someone that is definitely in the rotation next year. And Tasman Goodrick in Aussie, who was hurt pretty much all of last season for Siena, but started the first 9 games for them, has announced on his Instagram page and through social media today that he is committing to Syracuse and joining Jerry McNamara in the transition from Siena to Syracuse. So we can certainly get into the early rumblings of the portal, the guys that have left, what to make of where they may end up, and just the overall state of the Syracuse basketball roster and coaching staff as we head into the first offseason and a very important offseason for Jerry McNamara as the head coach of the Syracuse Orange. We can also talk about Sadiq White because he is officially back at Syracuse. The school releasing a post just about an hour or so ago, a little over an hour ago, that Sadiq White is returning to Syracuse, and it's one of those classic posts of I'm back, social media graphic with some highlights from Sadiq White. There were a lot of you worried about Sadiq White and his social media page, and I took callers yesterday wondering, will Sadiq White come back? We now have our answer officially to that, and it seems like there are going to be 2 players that return from the current roster to next year's roster for Syracuse basketball. Those 2 players being Kyan Anthony and Sadiq White, the 2 main freshman recruits, 2 top 100 recruits from last year's cycle, and now will be entering their sophomore year. So after 2 players returned from last year or 2 years ago into last year, J.J. Starling and Donnie Freeman, it's going to be another season, it appears, where Syracuse basketball brings back 2 players. But Jerry McNamara will bring in additional players from Siena, or a high school recruit we expect in Ryan Mesh, who is committed to Siena and also has 2 Siena players that are committed through the transfer portal right now. So that's familiarity for sure for GMAC to establish his culture and sort of set the tone of what he wants. And certainly the roster to this point is still the early stages of the roster. If you think about it, right now we basically know 5 players are definitely on the roster next year for Syracuse. It's the 2 returners, Kyan Anthony and Sadiq White. We have not gotten the I'm back graphic from Kyan yet, which I'm sure is coming. It's got to be coming. But because, I mean, if you don't get that I'm back graphic, are you actually coming back? That is essential in 2026 in the day and age of social media and college basketball that you drop that graphic. But, I mean, we know Kyan is coming back. Carmelo has already said on his podcast how excited he is that Kyan is going to be under the tutelage of Jerry McNamara next year. So Kyan's going to be back. Sadiq White, we got that I'm back graphic. We're locked in. You can't turn your back once you drop the I'm back graphic. We know he is coming back to Syracuse. We know Gavin Doty is coming. We know Tasman Goodrick from Siena is coming as of today, and we'll get into his full scouting report. If this is new news to you, we will talk in our Burdick BMW of Cicero and Burdick Toyota opening drive, all about Tasman Goodrick and what to expect in terms of what role he could fill on the roster next year. And then we know that Mark Morano Momtuvovic, who I'm still not 100% sure that's how you say his last name, but Mark Morano for sure is the first 2 names. And we know he's coming because reports are out there from reputable people that he is a international recruit that is going to start his college career next year as a 19-year-old for Syracuse basketball. So we know those 5 guys. All 5 of those guys kind of fit the bill of a Jerry McNamara player and what we know of a GMAC player, a high motor type of guy. I mean, Sadiq White certainly is a culture setter, a leader in the making, someone that really impressed me in terms of what he brought to the team from an intangible perspective last year. I said throughout the final couple months of the season, my top priority was Sadiq White. I also said throughout the final couple months of the season that I'd love to have Nate Kings back, but I did not think that was going to happen. I didn't think his waiver was going to get cleared, and there is a new rule that's being proposed today. Not that new, really. It's been discussed for a while, this 5 for 5, which is now going to get voted on, according to a Yahoo Sports report, in the next week or so, with the hopes of maybe getting implemented before next year, basically before the fall academic calendar of 2026. And the 5 for 5 is as simple as that. You get 5 years to play, or you get 5 seasons to play in 5 years. And if you get hurt, if you redshirt a year, it doesn't matter. You still just get 5 years. And if you are a 19-year-old, then you get 5 years. And basically from when you come into high school, or if you're a 19-year-old, it's whatever comes earliest, it's 5 years from there. So we can get into the ramifications of that. Not so sure if that would mean, I know immediately what comes to mind is, William Kyle could get an extra year then. He has only played 4 years. J.J. Starling could get an extra year then. He has only played 4 years. Some of you I know are now yelling in your cars right now, no, not another year for J.J. Starling. But a lot of you were also like, whoa, you just perked up when I said William Kyle might be able to get an extra year. I don't know if that'll actually happen. It just feels kind of crazy to think that they would be able to turn this around and impact the current seniors. But it's something that is probably coming in the near future, and it's something that is going to shape discussions of roster and construction of roster going forward once this is passed. It feels like this has been on the table for a while. There was some trepidation over lawsuits, and it's kind of been delayed. Maybe they're feeling better about that now. We can certainly get into that ruling and what to make of what it would mean for college athletics as we continue on Drive Time this afternoon. We're also taking your phone calls. We're also taking your comments on the Q Sports Talk chat, both on our YouTube chat and on our Twitch stream live chat, which is up and running on QSportsTalk.com. 315-437-7644 if you'd like to call in during our Burdick BMW of Cicero and Burdick Toyota opening drive. Should also note that Caden Mingo hit the portal earlier today, which we'll get into that name over the course of the show, and if that would be the ideal point guard for Syracuse, if that's the point guard that would make sense. There's nothing that is tangible that is out there tying Syracuse to him, or no reports that he's interested in Syracuse or Syracuse has expressed interest, but we're all connecting dots there based on the fact that Caden Mingo is the exact same age and same grade as Kyan Anthony, and he went to the exact same high school, and he shared a backcourt with Kyan Anthony at Long Island Lutheran High School, and he was at Penn State last year. Jamal Brunt, who the Orange officially announced on their coaching staff this morning, who was the associate head coach at Penn State, was their defensive coordinator. He was the top recruiter for Caden Mingo, and he is going to Syracuse, and Caden Mingo is in the portal. So we're connecting dots there. The other dot then to connect is Dylan Mingo. The younger brother by a year of Caden Mingo is a top 10 recruit who is currently committed to UNC. When I say top 10 recruit, top 10 in the entire class this year, one of the top point guards, certainly one of the top combo guards in the class, a potential starter as a freshman next year type of talent at the point guard position. And UNC just made a coaching change, and there's some speculation that Dylan Mingo would reopen his recruitment. So the Mingo brothers, do they want to play together? Do they have interest in Syracuse? We're connecting dots. The same way right now that I'm sure a lot of UNC fans are connecting dots and thinking, oh, Caden Mingo's in the portal. He's definitely coming to UNC, and the brothers are going to play together at UNC. Could be the case. They might not play together. They were planning on not playing together in a way because Dylan Mingo was committed to UNC and Caden Mingo was playing for Penn State. Caden Mingo was the highest rated recruit in Penn State basketball history as a top 40 recruit last year. So that was a big get for Jamal Brunt. And we think that Jamal Brunt had a big say-so in bringing in this Mark Morano Momtuvovic, because connecting the dots there, Penn State has a decent international pipeline. They had a couple Slovenian players on their roster this past year, and that is where Morano is from, and the same agent, and you kind of get the drift there that it seems like he set that one up or helped Syracuse get Mark Morano Momtuvovic. Let's dive into, though, the new player on the roster who I didn't know a whole lot about until about noon today when the news came out of a Tasman Goodrick who is going to come over from Siena and likely be a backup center and probably nothing more than that for Syracuse next year. Here's a quote from Jerry McNamara when he got him out of the portal last year from D2 Gannon to come to Siena College. G-Mac saying, I'm really excited about Tazzy going into this past year. He has great versatility, is physical, really skilled. At Gannon, Tazzy was a double-double machine. His mobility separates him from a lot of guys his size. I still think there's a ton of upside for him to grow because he has a great shooting stroke to expand his game. Tazzy is going to be a fun one to watch for us. That was GMAC going into this past year. He was supposed to be their best big and their starting center throughout the season. Tasman Goodrick got off to a great start. 6'9" Aussie, maybe 6'10", depending on where you look. Seems like probably 6'9"-ish, 6'10"-ish. Aussie Tasman Goodrick was averaging 9.7 points per game and 7.3 rebounds per game for Siena in 23 minutes per game. Not a ton of minutes per game. Very efficient numbers when he was starting in the first 9 games of this year. In their opener against Bryant, he dropped a 20-point performance. And remember, he did have tons of double-doubles at the D2 level 2 years ago, 20 double-doubles. That was second in all of Division II. Averaged 16 points per game, 11 rebounds per game at the D2 level, shooting just 25% from three, but a very efficient 56% from the floor. This past year, 64% from the floor at Siena in just 9 games. So what happened after the 9 games that he played? He had a knee injury, not an ACL, a knee injury. And he tried to rehab it and just kind of take some time off and get back into the lineup in conference play. And rehabbing wasn't helping it. I did reach out to Emmanuel Barbari, who is the play-by-play man voice of the Siena Saints, and he did want me to note that this kid is a total warrior. And it just sounds like he's a GMAC guy. It makes perfect sense why he would be coming over based on the things we're reading and hearing about him. But Emmanuel said that he's a warrior, and he sort of proved that because he could barely put any weight on his injured knee throughout the season, and he still wanted to play and never gave up trying to play. Then in early February, the school released that they were going to have a procedure done on his knee, and he would be out for about 2 to 3 months, which would effectively end his season. So early February, fast forward about 2 to 3 months, we're kind of in the ballpark of when he would be recovering. Certainly he will be ready to join Syracuse basketball and be healthy next year after this procedure. And I would imagine if GMAC is adding him out of the portal, then there's not much to worry about in the way of the knee injury. But that derailed his season, and that is even more proof why GMAC and his coaching job was very impressive. What Siena did to win the MAC conference is one thing. They were picked to finish third in the league, and that was assuming they would have Tasman Goodrick for the entire season. In a way, Goodrick was their starting center. He would have been probably a double-double machine in their conference and would have been one of their leading scorers. And if he stayed healthy throughout the entire year, we probably would have been talking about him all along like we've been talking about Francis Folafak, which is just a player that makes sense to make that leap to the ACC level. I don't think that Goodrick is going to be a starter. I don't think that he is going to be the sixth man. I would imagine he is going to fill, at best, kind of the Akir Soiree role of last year. Akir hit the portal. He was your backup center, and that's basically all he was. He averaged about 8 minutes a game or whatever it was. He played in most games. You have to fill your roster out, and this is not Syracuse is replacing Donnie Freeman with Gavin Doty, and they're replacing, I don't know, Tyler Betsy with Tasman Goodrick. This is Syracuse has added 2 players, and there's still a lot of players that they're going to add from here. The Orange are going to add a starting point guard and a starting center that we have not named, that is not on the roster right now, would be my guess. And if they don't do that, I would be completely dumbfounded. And Ryan Mesh is not going to be that starting point guard, I don't think. Ryan Mesh is probably coming. That's almost a lock, the same way that we felt like Gavin Doty was a lock. Ryan Mesh is from Chinango, and he was the highest-ranked recruit in Siena history when he committed, and he has decommitted and opened his commitment, and it's only logical that he is coming to Syracuse as GMAC shifts jobs from Siena to Syracuse. Ryan Mesh might crack the rotation next year. Tasman Goodrick might crack the rotation next year. There's no reason to panic here and think that Jerry is just bringing over the Siena team and that's going to be the roster. Syracuse has a lot of money from what we've gathered. They have more money than they've had in previous years. Maybe I shouldn't say a lot of money, but they're certainly doing better in terms of their roster budget. We imagine they're going to be competitive, and they're going to go out and get some star players in the portal, would be my guess. They need to, and they will do that. And adding Tasman Goodrick does not hurt them from getting a star player in the portal. There's 15 roster spots to fill. So I mentioned earlier, we know of 5 players. Maybe you add Ryan Mesh is basically a lock. That's 6. You had Francis Folafak. That's 7. You had Noah Lobdell. That's 8. You had Calvin Russell. Who knows if he'll even play basketball next year off the injury, but let's just add him. That's 9. That's still 6 spots, guys, that we don't know about right now. Will GMAC get all the way to 15? I don't know. But he could, and at the very least, that's probably 4 spots that we don't know about right now. So there's a lot of roster spots to fill, and there's no reason to be worried about how GMAC is going about filling them, or the idea that this is going to be Siena 2.0, I think is crazy. It makes sense that Syracuse would not have convinced a star yet, considering the portal just opened. If they had already gotten a commitment from a star player who is not a Siena player, who is not a logical sort of fit to come to Syracuse, then there could be a reason to believe they were tampering all along. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And sure, tampering is out there and it's happening. And I'm not saying that I'm naive to that or anything, but we're not going to find out about Syracuse's starting point guard on the second day of the portal, or Syracuse's starting center on the second day of the portal. But it makes logical sense that we'd find out about a Tasman Goodrich, because why not? He's coming over from Siena, and he's a role player that will be on the roster next year, and that's it, pretty much. That's our Burdick BMW of Cicero and Burdick Toyota opening drive. We will take your phone calls as we continue. If you have thoughts on the portal, if you have thoughts on guys that you would like to see them go after, we can get into Caden Mingo. We can discuss the roster some more. What are the holes in the roster? What types of players should they be looking for? We can do all that as we continue on Drive Time. 437-7644 is the phone number to call. We'll be back with more on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
Mary was diagnosed.
What is up? YouTube chat popping off. That's going to upset the Twitch people that I jumped right into the YouTube chat. Yeah, pretty amazing they got to the tournament. That's like for everyone that says, oh, Jerry didn't sub. He didn't have players to sub. They lost 3 valuable players throughout the season. Yes, Noah Lobdell, very important player. Yeah, AO definitely has worked with them before. Knee issues and SU big man, a time-honored tradition. Jamal Brunt wasn't his lead recruiter, Philly? Yeah, I don't think they're going to get that passed before next season, the 5 for 5. I do think it's a good rule, though. Five guys count for 3 to 5 million of rev share / NIL. Meaning like the role players, you're saying, San Diego Cuse? One star player might be 3 mil, so... Yeah, you got to spread it out, but I'm fine with them spending a lot of money on 2 or 3 players. No news on Ryan Blackwell. I would assume he's part of the staff. I would assume maybe Brian Bury and Ryan Bury are involved in the staff in some capacity too. Is that out there, Philly? In the Yahoo Sports article, they were kind of like, no news on if this would turn around in time. Siena was preseason 3rd, I thought. Maybe I was going off of, I was reading earlier the Basket Under Review article, preview of Siena. They were 3rd on that. Nice, Jen. Fran going to help out with Vera House? Oh, I see what you're saying. Guessing them. Yeah, it's tough to guess, especially with Cayenne. Sadiq White's probably making a good amount of money. Gavin Doty making a good amount of money, I'm guessing, but maybe he get a little hometown discount. Not sure if Mingo was entirely on Brunt. Crispin is I've just seen it out there that in articles, Jamal Brunt was the main recruiter. But if you have different knowledge, Philly, and I mean, certainly, and then Brunt has been the main recruiter for Dylan Mingo for Penn State too. So certainly it seems like there's a connection there at the very least, but seeing in articles and Penn State sites and stuff saying, oh no, Jamal Brunt, main recruiter, left. That probably means Caden Mingo's going to hit the portal, and then he did. They're connected. I thought you were saying related for a second. Yeah, Wilkins, didn't they reach out to him? That's already been out there, I think. Pretty much everyone they've reached out to is a guard or a center, which makes sense. Yeah, I think Brunt is definitely the lead recruiter.
ESPN Radio 97.7, 100.1, 1200 AM and 1440 AM. ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on QSportsTalk.com.
Welcome back into Drive Time, Wednesday afternoon. Looks like we're done with snow. Looking at the 14-day forecast, it's going to be nice going forward. And we're in the thick of transfer portal season. Masters week. A lot of things to discuss here on the radio airwaves, even though we won't see Syracuse basketball play a game for quite a bit. And it's going to be a while until the Jerry McNamara game, or era, I should say, tips off. It is really in full force right now, and we've got all kinds of reactions to this point, hot takes, overreactions. It's portal season. That's honestly some of the more fun season for us on the talk radio side of things. There's been a lot to discuss in April now that college sports has shifted things. For better or worse, this is a big part of the puzzle of trying to get back to where Syracuse basketball needs to be. It's putting together the right roster and spending money wisely, knowing the right connections, etc. this time of year. Let's go to the phone lines as we get rolling here on Drive Time at 437-7644. You can give us a ring for ESPN 44. Let's go to John in Liverpool, who's going to kick us off this afternoon. Hey, John.
Yeah, Tim, on the 5 for 5,
Yep.
you mentioned that is a proposal that's going to get voted on or something next week or something. Who votes? Is it every school, like 360 schools, or is there a special panel that votes for it? Do you know?
I don't think it's schools necessarily. I think it's more of like NCAA committee. I don't know exactly. I could effort that answer for you, but I don't think it's like Syracuse has a representative and everyone has a representative. I think it's kind of like the head of the NCAA has a say in it, and sort of the cabinet members of the NCAA.
Is there a part of any sports departments that are against it? Is the SEC against it? Is the we don't know
anything on that, John. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are fearful that if it happened, lawsuits would still be open and waivers would still happen. It's kind of a tough precedent to set. But I'm guessing most coaches, I mean, I don't know this, but I feel like most coaches would be for this because it's pretty tough right now. Like, take Nate Kings, for example. If you're Jerry and there's an outstanding waiver on him, how do you plan your roster next year? Or in the case of football, there's one transfer portal window and you might be waiting on a waiver and the NCAA might not get to it. And then you're kind of like, do I fill his spot or do I assume he's coming back? So I think it would provide clarity for all involved if we just remove the waivers and the question mark that comes with the waivers, essentially.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, that 5 for 5 rule, it was Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports who came out with an article this morning on it and was basically breaking down that it seems like this is going to get brought up and voted on in about a week. The specifics on it, for anyone that missed this, in the article, It says, according to the concept, NCAA athletes would have 5 full years of eligibility from the time of their 19th birthday or their high school graduation, whichever is earliest. So if you're a typical high school American graduate, you would get 5 years from when you start your college career. In the case of like Uche Azoje or a player like that, which that might impact Uche, I don't think necessarily it would, because she's 21. She's going to be entering her age 22 season as a sophomore. So basically, this is preventing players from playing into their age 25 season. 19 to 24 is 5 years. That's your 5 years to play. Or in the case of a Mark Morano, who is already 19 and is coming over to college, he would have 5 years to play from his 19th birthday. But what it is saying is 5 for 5. If you get injured, if you redshirt, there are no waiver requests, no red shirts, no exceptions will be permitted except for a small group of outliers, those on maternity leave, military service, or religious missions. So let's just hypothetically walk through a career of a college athlete if this rule gets put into place. Let's say they come in, they're not ready to play. Now, this is probably going to reduce the number of red shirts. There's just not much of a purpose in a red shirt year if everyone gets 5 years anyway. So that's probably going to be one ramification from it. So maybe an Aaron Womack last year wouldn't have redshirted, because what does the red shirt do for you? You're still getting 5 years if you redshirt or not. But let's say first year, they tear their ACL, unfortunately, random college athlete who's playing any sport in America. Second year, they come back, they're healthy, they have a nice year, they transfer to a different school. Third year, unfortunately, another bad injury, broken hand, they're out for the entirety of the year. Then they just have 3 years of playing in college, and that's it. They can't apply for a waiver and say, no, I didn't even get to play 4 years. I didn't get to play 5 years. I have a grad year still, etc. Basically, this is going to remove anyone like the Michigan star Lindenberg, who I think has been in college for about 8 years, or any of those players like a David Reese last year, where we're saying, how is this kid still in college? He's a man now. He's 27. He's 28. He's older than 50 players that are in the NBA or 50 players that are in the NFL, etc. And all these weird ones where we're wondering, how have they gotten a waiver to get one more year? The Joey Aguilars, the Diego Pavias. In the case of a Dominique Darius, I don't know when these rules will get put into place. Dominique Darius is actively in the process of applying for a waiver. I've heard they feel pretty good about her chances of getting the waiver and getting that additional year for Syracuse women's basketball next year. Would this change things? It doesn't feel like it would be put in place for this batch. But going forward, I don't know if a Dominique Darius would, you can't apply for waivers, and it would remove someone like that who is 24 and going on 25 and fighting for an additional year of college eligibility. Nate Kings right now is trying to argue that he gets one more year because he started his career at JUCO. He also missed a year with an injury. There would be none of that. So I think it's good. It would be unfortunate if you just have an injury-riddled career like a Chance Westry right now. He's back in the portal. He went to UAB. He had a nice year. Good facilitator at UAB. He was healthy throughout the year finally. And as it stands right now, 23-year-old Chance Westry is in the portal with 2 years of eligibility. If this rule goes into place, that would probably go down to 1 year, or going forward, someone like Chance Westry could not play past being 24 years old, because the latest you can play is you join college at 19 years old and you get 5 years. If you join college at 21, like Uche Azoje did last year, you can only play basically from 5 years onward from your 19th birthday. So you can only play 3 years in her case. So I think it's good. One thing that would be a big takeaway right off the bat that comes to mind for me, if it was put into place before next year, which we don't know the specifics on this, and this might be wishful thinking, but let's say this vote passes And starting next year, all the seniors currently get an additional year. Feels unlikely this would happen. I mean, then you're thinking about a William Kyle maybe getting an extra year. But if it did happen, then men's lacrosse their championship window would expand 1 year. We're all under the assumption right now, this class of 2022, which includes Michael Leo in his last year, Joey Spallina in his last year, Finn Thompson, Billy Juan, Luke Roa. I could go on down the list. Dylan Seguider, Jordan Beck, Chuck Kaczynski. I think Chuck Kaczynski had an injured year, so he could come back. So a lot of these guys, Riley Figueres could come back. Jimmy McCool could come back. But the names that I mentioned off the top, Spallina, Thompson, Leo, Roa, I mean, that's your starting attack line and some of your best offensive players. Those guys would then, in theory, maybe get an extra year. I think it's probably wishful thinking to say they would, starting next year, change the rule for the players that are current seniors. But it would have a big impact on lacrosse because as it stands right now, Duke gets a lot of players. Georgetown gets a lot of players because they run out of eligibility, or Ivy League players. I don't know if they would adapt to this. Probably not, because the Ivy League is just sort of like you play 4 years and that's it. So it would lead to a lot of Ivy League transfers, which we already see. That's why you see a lot of Ivy League grad transfers, because if you go to the Ivy League, you're going to get that degree, you're going to finish it out, and then you're going to look to play one more additional year somewhere else. In lacrosse, you see a lot of Duke grad transfers. You see a lot of Georgetown grad transfers because they have a good business school that has a 1-year master program. So that would shake things up a little bit for that. And it would make things interesting for sure, because lacrosse is the type of sport, as is women's basketball, that you could make a strong argument your peak time or your most notoriety as a athlete in women's, men's lacrosse, women's basketball is playing in college. The professional leagues have grown. Certainly in the WNBA, it's like skyrocketing viewership, attendance, etc. The money's going up. And a lot of players do go to the WNBA, but if you get an extra year at college, the way that college athletes are now getting paid, you usually take advantage of that in those particular sports. Same would go for softball and a lot of other sports down the road as well. We'll hit a timeout here. We can get to more of your phone calls as we continue on Drive Time. 437-7644 if you'd like to call in. You're listening to Drive Time on ESPN Radio, QSportsTalk.com.
Jerry McNamara.
Jordan in the YouTube chat. Yeah, getting the entire lacrosse team back would be amazing. Again, probably wishful thinking, but that would be the one sport that would have a huge swing. That's a fair point, Jordan. If you suffer 2 major injuries in 5 years, I would argue it's for the best you don't play an extra year of college if you're not good enough to go pro. Especially, you're still going to get paid for those years, in theory. Kai and Sadiq Doty, of those 3, who do you see as a potential starter? I think Sadiq definitely a starter. I think Doty I would rank him Sadiq, Doty, Kyan. I think Sadiq definitely will start. Doty most likely a starter. And then, Kyan probably a starter as well. Bryson is using a 3D printed iron. That's the most Bryson thing ever. I didn't see that. I had the par 3 on earlier in the background. Good to have the Masters starting tomorrow. I think Bryson will probably be up there this week. I was thinking I'd probably say, what I say earlier, I said Ludwig would be a good pick. I liked James Colgan's pick on Orange Nation of Akshay as a deep sleeper. I I think I'm going to pick Scotty in my one and done league. I'm hoping not as many people are going to pick him because he hasn't had a top 10 in 3 events. How dare him? But he's the best iron player and the best chipper in the world, and those are 2 very key traits at Augusta. And he plays amazing here. And I mean, is Scotty really going to go 4 straight events without a top 10 after he went 19 straight before that? F Panther Creek. My sister went to Panther Creek. I don't have like a vendetta against them. Our sports scene, it's not like we were competing for state championships against them. It was just like a little bit of a rivalry, if anything. You would almost hope that all 3 of those guys don't start, because that would mean they're adding 3 starters out of the portal, and that'd probably be better for them. You know, like we know they're probably adding 2 starters, point guard and center. Depending on how much you could spend a lot of money on 2 starters and make it 2 stars, or you could go like 1 star and 2 role starters, maybe. Love to see Rory go back to back. That'd be awesome. Can you direct me to articles or mentions in Brunt being the lead on either Mingo? I could look for them, but I mean, I'm not making it up, Philly. I mean, you said earlier something like, except for in PSU's bio, like, why don't you trust Penn State's bio? I'm sure they wouldn't, of all the people to get it wrong, I would hope Penn State's own bio wouldn't get it wrong. Oh, they are down there? That's awesome. You ever been, Ryan, to the Masters? I've gone twice. I went 2014 practice round, then in 2017 I went to the first round.
As you promised me that I was more than all the miles combined, you must have had yourself.
Transfer portal day number 2 around the country. Syracuse basketball, 2 additions already, both from Siena coming over with Jerry McNamara. Got Gavin Doty yesterday. Today we found out about the latest commitment for the Orange basketball team, Tasman Goodrick. Goodrick will likely be kind of a backup center role player for them next year. Was hurt most of this past season, which speaks to how good of a job Jerry did on getting his team to the NCAA tournament despite not having their best big on paper through the first 9 games of the season. And certainly he would have been a double-double machine for them. Instead, he got hurt. And like I said earlier, if Goodrick wasn't hurt, we probably would have already connected the dots that he is a logical guy to come over. And GMAC knows his game, and he seems to be the type of big that GMAC really wants to have on his roster. And he seems to be another high-motor guy and a guy that will fit culturally with what Jerry McNamara is trying to build. At the very least, it feels like right now they've got a lot of very good culture guys, and I'm sure they're going to surround the bare bones of the roster to this point, which is 5 players we know of for sure. And if you count Ryan Mesh and Fullefak, you get up to 7 players. So there's lots of roster spots still available. A starting point guard, a starting center, maybe another starter. Certainly, I would say another key contributor or 2 on top of 2 starters are going to be brought into the roster, and it will be very fascinating to see who they bring in. And it's also always fascinating to see those guys that leave Syracuse. Where will they go? And how will they do next year? That's kind of the fun of the transfer portal season. We'll have to wait, of course, for some of those answers. Let's go back to the phone lines right now if you'd like to call in. Phone number is 315-437-7644 for ESPN 44. We go to Dave in Stonington. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for taking my call. This is a crazy time of the year with this portal thing. Wasn't like this a long time ago, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the portal. I went on and saw some of these names that are popping up, and you know that the Cuse is looking for power forwards. They're looking for a guard. What do you think of Aaron Muse out of Providence?
I honestly haven't really looked into them that much, but obviously, I mean, I looked on the Providence roster earlier today, and they have one guy on their roster right now, as Brian Hodgson is bringing in a lot of new guys. So I don't know. You could tell me something about him, I'm sure, Dave, but you think he's a good fit for Syracuse?
I'll tell you what, he's out of Putnam Science.
Okay.
If Cuse doesn't get him, UConn will.
Yeah?
That's for sure, because they're right down the road. And between Providence and UConn, they fight over these Putnam Science kids. Estrella seems like a take out of Tennessee.
Yeah.
Any word on Francis Folafak?
I would imagine he will commit. I could see that happening tomorrow. Maybe they're rolling him out, and it's day one Doty, it's day two Tasman, who I'm blanking on his last name, the guy Goodrick, who they had added earlier today, and then day three, maybe it's Francis Folafak. I think they might be rolling him out like that. I'm sure Francis Folafak is coming. I feel pretty confident in that. Not knowing anything, but it just makes logical sense.
Right. Guard-wise, how about a Jalen Harrelson out of Notre Dame?
He really hasn't jumped out at me as a guy that would... I mean, Notre Dame's got a couple guys in the portal that I think are interesting. Obviously, Marcus Burden, who I saw is taking a visit to Houston. He's one of the top ACC guys right now. He's had some injury problems. I would think that all these guys are on the table. I mean, the tough part is we're throwing out a lot of names because there's so many different players in the portal. My mindset is kind of let's see where the breadcrumbs lead us, and then we'll dive into those names, because if I was looking at all the players, you know, that's 1,000+ players. So, but that guy hasn't really jumped out at me from Notre Dame much when I've watched them.
I'll tell you, he was hurt, and then he came back, and he looked good. One guy that stands out, because we get a lot of Big East down here, being in Connecticut and the Providence area, Finn Bizjack out of Butler.
Okay.
Is a Jerry type of player. Has a motor that doesn't stop, and he's got a mindset that would be great for the Cuse. He's got 1 year left, I believe, and that's it.
Yeah, I do think they need some veteran guys, Dave. I mean, you look at the roster they have right now, and again, this is 5 players in of potentially 15, so they're going to fill this out, and they understand what they need more than even me. But, you know, you've got a sophomore in Sadiq White, you've got a sophomore in Kyan Anthony, maybe a freshman in Ryan Mesh joining. You've got a potential sophomore in Folafak. It's a lot of underclassmen guys. The freshman Mark Morano, Momtuovic, who we're assuming and will be on the roster next year. So they don't have any seniors outside of Goodrick, who they added today, and then Gavin Doty, who's a junior. So it would be nice to bring in some veteran leadership and also some guys that have played power conference basketball for a while and maybe played in an NCAA tournament as well.
I'll tell you something. It'll be great to see some excitement in the arena next year, just to see Doty lace him up for the Orange, because he brings that intense that Syracuse has been lacking for the past 3 years.
Yeah, he'll be a fan favorite if it works out, for sure. I mean, he's going to have tons of fans and family and friends at every game as well, and it'll be a great story. It's the same way that when Jerry McNamara was here as a player and he was 2 hours away, he was a fan favorite just based on the way he played and how close his family and friends were to coming to every game.
Yep, back up the buses to Fulton, because the Doties will be coming down.
Yeah, exactly. And the Meshes, too, probably from Chittenango. So, all right, Dave.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for taking my call. Have a great night.
You too. Dave in Stonington. He's always got the Connecticut and Big East names to throw at us there. Even Notre Dame feels like a Big East team. We're in that time period of the year where we're just throwing out names. And some of those were fancy names that I can't even remember from Dave. I'm sure they're all good players. I think it's a fascinating thing, because you can dive into this as much or as little as you want. And I know a lot of you that are listening right now, you're diehard Cuse fans, and you've gone down the list of the 50 to 100 players that you have on your wish list for Syracuse. And we'll just see. I mean, certainly they're going to bring in a good chunk of players from the portal. They've already brought in 2. Full-Effect would be 3. We already know a Mark Morano is an additional roster add. I mean, they're only bringing back 2 players. And if you count Noah Lobdell and Calvin Russell, that's 4 players. If they do come back, I'm sure Noah Lobdell will be on the team next year. And I'm sure Calvin Russell probably will be on the team next year as well. So there's a lot of roster spots open. And my mindset is we really can't evaluate or we can't jump to conclusions on how good this roster is or isn't going to be until we have full clarity. And I know that's tough to do and it requires patience and we're all eager to find out and we're all trying to be the one to know the scoop or be the insider, but let's see how it plays out. When we come back, I do want to talk about should we be worried that Syracuse does not have a general manager officially announced yet? Why is that? Does that mean that they don't have one in place to this point? We'll get into that as we return. We can also take one more phone call if you'd like at 437-7644. You're listening to Drive Time.
Be sure to tune into
Not every school has a certified big or a former big guy that's coaching the big men. Jesse Edwards developed a good amount, and they didn't have AO on staff. I think that gets overblown. But in other words, I don't think we're magically going to see Syracuse get way better production from their big men just because AO's on staff. I think they've had good coaches and one coach that was designated to be the big man coach all along. Yeah, I'll shake my magic 8-ball. That's a good idea. The Micron Dome. If Scooter's in the portal, he's got to be going to either Boise State or Gonzaga, right? Phone's ringing, Paul. What do I think of Tom, Dick, or Harry? Really, number 33 on the rankings? Chance did have a great year. I'll tell you guys this story. I don't think Chance is coming back to Syracuse, but who knows? But one of my buddies who works down there in Birmingham was interviewing him this year, and he's a Syracuse guy, and he said that Chance was like, so who do you think's getting, this is before they even officially fired Red, but in that time period where we all knew it was sadly coming to an end, or for some of you it was ecstatic that it was coming to an end, but anyway, he was interviewing him, and Chance was like, you think they're going to hire GMAC? Like, is GMAC the guy? So I don't know if he wants GMAC. There's nothing to take from that, but it's just kind of funny that they did end up hiring GMAC, and now he's in the portal again. I doubt Chance, like Donna said, I doubt Chance would want to come back here. I mean, it just didn't go well. And it's funny hearing the comments from the UAB coach, Andy Kennedy, and how he's like, he's one of the more talented guys we've ever had, but he's also just an idiot, or what was his quote? Like, he runs up and down the court and he's dying. I mean, it seemed like Chance, one of the biggest health issues he had was that sinus infection that he just like couldn't keep energy up as he went up and down the court. But GMAC did have that famous quote to us that he's one of the more talented guys on the roster in practice. Remember when before you could just transfer willy-nilly and you had to sit out a year? We heard so many good things about Elijah Hughes, the most talented guy in practice, when he was sitting out that one year. Then that kind of panned out. Needs so much shooting. I mean, Morano's a good shooter. Kyan, we hope, is going to be a better shooter. I think they need defense more than shooting, but shooting would be nice. I think Doty's an improved shooter. He should be a solid option shooting the basketball. Mesh is kind of an okay shooter. His numbers weren't great, but people think he's a better shooter than his numbers showed. Fullefak had a couple threes in the tournament, but he's not really a shooter, although same with Goodrick. They think Fullefak could be more of a shooter is kind of the word on him. That's what GMAC has been saying. Why wouldn't he be trustworthy, Jordan? He interviewed Bigfoot. It's pretty amazing.
7.7 and 100.1. ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on QSportsTalk.com.
Final segment this afternoon on Drive Time. Mr. Jones bringing us back. 315-437-7644 for ESPN 44 if you'd like to call in. Day 2 of the transfer portal, and we're still trying to figure out the roster and react to the comings and goings of transfer portal season. Let's go back to the phone lines. We've got our guy Tony in Syracuse, who is next up on Drive Time. Hey, Tony.
Hi, Tim.
How you doing?
Oh, great with this weather, finally.
Yeah, a little sunny out there, right?
Yeah, I'm almost confused what that bright light is in the sky.
Exactly.
You're going down the GM road. I also was curious. So I believe we have one assistant coaching spot left.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, you can have up to 5 assistants. I'd imagine they will. So I would imagine, yes, one more assistant coach we don't know about officially is going to be a part of the staff.
Percentage-wise, how much do you think it's going to be Blackwell?
I think Blackwell I think he's a part of the staff, Tony, would be my guess. But then you get into, is he going to be an assistant coach? Is he going to be player development? When I say staff, keep in mind, like Pete Corsiniti, I think we're all in agreement, is probably on the staff next year in a way, but he's not probably going to be an assistant coach. Pete Corsiniti is probably going to return to his role of director of basketball operations. Then you've got... Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So
no, you're fine.
So we got one assistant, and then how many of the player development or these extra...
yeah, I mean, that's all up to GMAC. It differs school to school. You know, a school like Duke has several player development guys. I would hope that Syracuse would have a couple, maybe just one. And then, I mean, maybe he works in Brian Bury or even Ryan Bury. Ryan Bury was his Dobo at Siena. Brian Bury was like special assistant to the coach and a pretty accomplished assistant coach in his own right. So, you know, maybe Brian Bury is that final assistant, and then Ryan Blackwell is player development, and you've got Ryan Bury as like a video guy, and then you've got, I'm just sort of guessing here, you've got Pete Corsiniti as the Dobo, and that sort of rounds it out.
So the real quick, if you could, the assistant coaches that we do have, I saw it quick, but I was just curious off the top of your head. The areas that they're good at recruiting in?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly for Ryan Daly, kind of that DMV area. It feels like Jamal Brunt is the one that has some international connections. I could be just connecting dots here, but it feels like he signed some guys with the same agent as Mark Morano. So I think they're pretty covered in terms of the typical hotbeds that you want Syracuse to be involved in. So, you know, they're bringing in good recruiters.
Does Lee have any experience in recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, he was
Washington area, that part.
Yeah, if you're an assistant, you have experience in recruiting, you have good connections, I'm sure, depending on how long you've been an assistant. I think Ben Lee is known for being a really good mind as well, but I think all these guys have recruiting connections, and I think they're in a good spot in terms of the recruiting contacts that they have on their staff. I mean, Jamal Brunt has been one of the top recruiters for Penn State year in and year out. He seems to be bringing in good talent to Penn State and before that at VCU.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that was finalized.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the GM will be interesting, but you were going to talk about that, so I just want to jump in regarding that last spot, and then you answered a couple other on the player development where somebody might fall into. So I appreciate it. Have a great night, and go Jerry.
All right. Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it. Tony in Syracuse. Yeah, on the GM, we've got just maybe a minute or two left here, and I'll spend it talking about that. I feel that the general manager position, my first inclination was they've got to bring in a GM before the portal, and I was definitely initially surprised. And I still think the right move would have been bringing in a GM before the portal, although you don't want to rush that hire. You want to make sure that it's the correct hire. And remember, they're definitely hiring a general manager. Jerry said that. He was, point blank about it, as matter of fact as you could be, when he came on Orange Nation and said, we are definitely hiring a GM. Absolutely. It's a non-negotiable in this day and age in college basketball. I believe, to paraphrase, his quote was, 10 years ago, who would have thought this? Now here we are, and you've just got to have a general manager. And he said they have to have grassroots experience. We're having conversations on that front. So maybe they're in the interviewing process right now. Maybe they already have their general manager. I will say this. I thought about it a little bit more today. Remember, Alex Klein was hired, and he basically had a runway of an entire season. He was hired going into Red's third year, and that was his first year with his imprint. But we knew of Alex Klein around the end of the portal after year 2. So I wonder if they're kind of like, should we bring in a GM now if they haven't even been scouting for our purposes all year? Are they really worthwhile to bring in now and help us in this portal? And some of you would say, well, yeah, I mean, you got to have a general manager in place. But if the general manager has not been scouting all year for Syracuse, how helpful would they be? If they did bring in a GM this year, are they kind of just going to be going off of the same list that the assistant coaches have and providing some input here or there? Whereas Michaela Walker, the general manager for Syracuse women's basketball, has been on the staff for a while. She was hired, you almost think she was hired last year, but this is her first year. And the general manager's job is to gather film all throughout the year so you are prepared for the portal. So you know exactly who are the players that match up with the analytics and the scheme that you are trying to run. UNC has had a general manager, and Mike Malone's their new head coach, and he may keep on the same GM. He may go a different route. There's plenty of teams right now that are making coaching changes and don't necessarily have that general manager position locked in. And in the case of Jerry McNamara, he came from a school where he didn't have a GM. If you're, say, a Brian Hodgson, I'm not sure who the Providence GM is right now, but it might just be that he brought the South Florida GM with him. Maybe they didn't even have a GM. I honestly don't know. And that's something we can look up. But point being that in the past, Syracuse has brought in Alex Klein and Michaela Walker, and they've come in sort of right after the close of one portal, and they've had an entire runway to get ready for the next portal season. That's just how they've done in the past. So I don't know if there's something there in the contract where they want to hire them after one portal season, and then you're getting more out of your money that you're spending on the coach. I'm not sure. It could be that they planned on bringing in a GM, and they do have a GM in place, and we just don't know him. I'm purely speculating. I don't know the answer to this topic, but I wonder, just as we're speculating, if that goes into the equation at all. That will be that for Drive Time this afternoon. Thanks for listening. As always, thanks to Paul for producing. We'll be back tomorrow. Orange Nation 12 to 2, Drive Time 5 to 6 p.m. every weeknight in Central New York. We'll talk to you then on QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio.